Sean, alcoholic. It's great to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. You had your name in lights for the first time, and it's the first time I've ever had a night show introduction. So I appreciate that. You want to adjust that? Because I'm short, isn't it? You think that's a short joke? It's a short joke. It's good to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Real quickly, I want to get some things out, first, some things I think are important. I got sober when I was 19 years old, and I haven't found it necessary to take a drink ever since. I just think that's important to know. And the other really cool thing is that, what I guarantee you is that in the past 36 years, there's absolutely nothing that I've heard different than anything you're going to hear tonight or what you've heard from the people who've shared already. I really wish that there was some magical thing that I could share tonight that could strike you sober forever. But that's probably not going to happen. But I have a couple pieces of really good news. And the real good news is that these are some things that friends of Randy's and mine shared for years. And that's, one is, you can leave this room and never take another drink of alcohol as long as you live, if you don't want to. Now, there was an argument between the other friend who used to share that, and he said the kicker, though, is as long as you're willing to work the steps as outlined in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So there was a little bit of a kicker at the end of that one. So I'll tell you, I'll go through basically my story, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I think the most interesting thing is that I think I've now been sober like 6 times as long as I drank. And again, when I got sober, at age 19, I had all the old timers, all the older guys that we knew, and I guess I'm the older guy now. But they'd come up and the whole thing, that I spilled more than you drank was something they said to young people. And us young people would always say, well, maybe if you didn't spill so much, you would have gotten here sooner. There's always some good quid pro, some nice stabs back. And I used to go to a men's stag meeting where once a year, they had to have the annual, are we going to let people talk about drugs, and what about the people who did drugs coming here? And I learned some really good things in my first years of Alcoholics Anonymous. And first off, I don't have to be uniquely different from the rest of the people in AA. And I don't have to, that my membership here and that my desire to stop drinking and my desire to not drink is all I really need to be fully grounded in Alcoholics Anonymous and to be here despite the other shit I've done, the other stuff that's gone in my head, the things that I haven't done, the things I thought about doing. I belong in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I earned this the same way as you all did, the hard way. So I don't know about you, but, when I was a young kid, I was an anxious wreck as a kid. Fear drove me my whole life. And I didn't really know how to deal with it. And I was telling Randy a story at dinner tonight that it's not one of those, you probably all have a lot of really proud moments as a kid, and I've got some that aren't quite so proud. So a couple things that are important, like detail. So my dad's a psychiatrist. So it's just kind of important just kind of keep that back in your mind as I'm sharing tonight. My mom is not a psychiatrist, but my mom she says she's 5 feet tall. My dad is 6 feet tall, so you can tell I kind of split the difference, right? And so I'm somewhere like in the middle there. Well, my mom, just to give you an idea, because these are all really important things. So my mom's the kind of person that if you say that you're not going to be attending a family event, and if one of my 5 kids say that they're not going to attend, I pull back and I go, you got to tell them. and then they're like, I think I'll go. So a little bit about like my family. When I was young, and I really never knew how to ask for anything that I knew how to get what I wanted, but never by asking. I knew how to get by manipulating you, by twisting the truth, by not being fully transparent. I thought that's how it worked, right? I didn't think that you could just say, hey, could I? And when I was 10 years old, all I wanted was my mom to come rub my back to go to bed. That's all I wanted. And you're thinking, what the hell does this have to do with drinking? Well, what happened was, what started off was what I pretended I had a stomach ache. It turned into auditory and visual hallucinations. It turned into me being hospitalized for 3 months when I was 10 years old. My dad, a physician, worried that his son had a brain tumor. Hospitalizing me. We lived in Spain at the time. My dad was Air Force. They moved me to a specialty hospital at the Air Force in Germany for a month, and then the San Antonio. And my illness, quote unquote, was the cause of my entire family having to pick up and move from Spain to San Antonio, Texas, where we spent the next 10 years. And the whole time I was full of shit. The whole time I was full of shit. I remember, I learned how to tell psychiatrists what they wanted to hear early on. I don't know if you guys are like that at all, but I just know, people would say this, the doctor would say, so, do you hear things or do you smell things? Smell things, right? I mean, I felt like I was just going down a hallway and I wasn't smelling anything. They go, well, does it smell like fruit, or is it sour, or does it smell like meat? Meat. And so I was having these olfactory hallucinations that I was smelling smoked bologna, and then I was going blind. And I mean, seriously, I'd be in the car and I'd tell my dad I can't see, and I could see fine. My poor dad. Anyway, so I remember after it was about 3 months in the hospital stay, and they were doing these EEGs where you have to, these electroencephalographs where they stick long tubes up your nose to measure your brain waves, to look at brain activity. And since they thought I was having seizures, they thought that I might have a tumor. They saw something weird in an MRI scan. And anyway, I stayed up all night, and all I remember is looking at the doctor as he was inserting these tubes up my nose, and something told me that he knew, that I knew, that he knew I was full of shit. And it was a miracle. I never had another seizure. I didn't smell anything, and I was like the guy coming up from the tornado cellar, right? I don't see anything the matter here, Ma, right? I don't see anything wrong, what's going on? As I just, traumatized my entire family. So that's Sean, just so you guys know. I just want you to know that's my MO. If you want, how I approach life is kind of that I will lie by the seat of my pants to get anything that I want because I don't think I belong and I couldn't ask for anything. Around the time I was 13, I started, I learned the magic of substances, and I remember my dad being a psychiatrist, he decided that he was going to try and treat me, right? And because he knew that after all this time that what happened when I was young must have been depression or manic depression or schizophrenia or something. And so at age 15, I started being put on a bunch of psychiatric drugs, and I was being carefully managed by the person that I manipulated, right? And I learned things. I learned that if you took the pills and if you ground them up and then took them, that they worked faster. And I also, you learn the things you learn how to steal the alcohol, but you keep filling it up with water. Well, really, it's all water that's in the bottles that are left. I had my first girlfriend when I was just before I turned 16, and she stayed the night at the house one night, not because anyone invited her to, but because we decided to raid the liquor cabinet. And what I do remember about that night is it was when you're in your first loving relationship, there's nothing that is a greater testament of love than when you hold their head when they're vomiting and they hold your head while you're vomiting. That is a sign of true partnership and bonding. And anyway, so that night I passed out. That's all I know. And I passed out that night. And the next morning I woke up and there had been a third person with us, a friend of mine. And he had apparently stolen the keys to my parents' car to drive someone home that night or something, my girlfriend home. And anyway, and so the next morning I found out that the car, weird things happened. And then Then they come back about an hour later to tell me that they felt so guilty they had to tell my parents everything that happened the night before. So my 16th birthday present, what I got for a gift that year was I got to watch my dad pour all the alcohol down the sink from the bar, and that was my present. And I told him, I go, you don't understand, Dad, I didn't like it. You don't. I learned my lesson. I didn't like it. I'm never going to do that again. And I did learn my lesson, but that was to try to be a little bit smarter about not passing out at home with your girlfriend and someone who can steal your car. And so, that's really how, my high school career began. It became to drinking. And I began, and I'm the kind of guy, and I don't know about you, but I really liked drinking and using alone. I liked drinking and using alone. I liked listening to Stevie Nicks albums while the drugs and the alcohol kicked in, and I would look at posters and begin to hallucinate in my room and listen to the Close Encounters soundtrack, and shoot BBs from a BB gun across the room and write poetry and so I was going to be the maudlin, kind of. I wanted to be like a poet. That's really what I wanted to be, because they seemed like they drank, right? Poets drank. That's what you do when you're an artist, right? That my entire junior and senior year, what I do remember in high school is I don't remember my senior year at all, not at all. I remember one teacher that I had. And it makes me wonder sometimes. There are a lot of friends. Facebook is supposed to be this place where you get to connect with a lot of high school people. They don't include me in a lot of things. and it's probably because my first girlfriend, she had first been my best friend's girlfriend, and then she was my girlfriend. And so he doesn't include me in it. He won't accept my friend request. And that's the kind, again, that's the kind of person that I was when I drank, is that I would steal from you, I would take from you, I would do anything I could do to fill that hole that was raging inside of me that made me feel like I wasn't enough and I couldn't look in the eye. And then somehow I graduated high school, and we were sharing earlier, and I'm going to share part of Randy's story. Randy's the kind of guy who made B's in school because he wanted people to leave him alone. I didn't care that much. I don't know about you, but I was really happy that I graduated in the top half of my class in high school in Texas. And so I was out of 1,000 people, I was probably 501, and that's because most of the other people had dropped out. But anyway, when I was 18 years old, I decided, I had a friend of mine who said, you know what, Sean, you'd be a really good drug dealer. And and I remember thinking, you think so? And I didn't have much of a career path at the time. I was a theater major at the time, and I thought I'll give it a shot. And so at the time, it was when Ecstasy had just came out, and I started, and I was given a really good deal by the guy who fronted me. He said, dude, look at this. For every 9 you sell, you get 1. The problem is that I didn't have enough people who were buying in comparison to how much I was taking. And I don't know about you guys, but that's the kind of drug dealer I was, is that I just couldn't. I was not a very good businessman. And so I ended up owing a lot of people money. Is what began to happen. And I decided to give that another try when I went away to college, too, and that didn't turn out very well at all. There's only so much B12 you can put into stuff without people knowing that there's no drug in it. And so as far as, and I'll share some, and you will hear sharing about drugs from me tonight, but then the main story is that the rehab doctor, when I went to the rehab the very first night, and he was doing my intake, he took down a list of everything I was doing, and he wrote down, he goes, so you were a toxic waste dump. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I used to think it was a badge of honor that I didn't do certain things. I used to think it was a badge of honor that I didn't use needles, or that I didn't do this or didn't do that. I just want to be really clear, in total honesty, it's just because no one ever offered it to me. That's it. I didn't have any ethics or morals. Any line that I said, well, I'm not going to cross this line, I meant the next line. I meant the next line, right? Like I kept having to like redefine all the things as they go on. So I went away to college, and I got a theater scholarship for a college out in California. My dad moved to Santa Barbara to work for Sansom Clinic down there, and I went to Whittier College, and that's when pretty much like like the visual I just had in my mind is like having like a balloon that's tethered to the ground. You know what I mean? There's like a few things, and like picture a windstorm, and picture like the snapping of all those like tethers, and that's what happened when I went away to college. Was like anything that was tethering me to any type of semblance of sanity, those tethers just snapped, and I was off and running. My first year of college, a couple things I remember about that first year. I do remember after being up for about 72 hours straight. I'll tell you a couple stories. First off, I remember I wanted to be a thief. I don't know about you guys, but I wanted to be a pickpocket, or not a pickpocket. I wanted to be a good shoplifter, and I would. I shoplifted a ton of stuff. A lot of my amends were paying stores back. But I really wanted to be a thief, and I remember one night we were all really loaded, and I was trying to steal from a vending machine, and we had it all the way tilted, and then we heard a sound, and so I'm small. And you got a picture, I'm like on top of this vending machine holding it, and the guy says, "Oh shit," and then he lets go. I was on it, and I got caught between like the wall and the vending machine. And I just remember being taken to Whittier Presbyterian Hospital, and I couldn't reach my wallet. And I remember asking the security guard who had to drive me to the hospital if he'd please get my wallet out of my back pocket. And I've never seen a man look more uncomfortable in my life. He was really uncomfortable with that. But, I didn't see anything wrong with this behavior, nothing at all. I didn't see anything wrong with stealing the bottle of cough syrup from the school physician, so that by the time I had 3 drinks that I'd already be caught up with everybody. I didn't see anything wrong with those decisions. I didn't see anything wrong with going into your house and stealing, your jewelry. And I could still be your friend because I wasn't stealing it because I wanted to steal it from you. I was stealing it because I wanted to get something that I felt I needed. The end of that school year ended with me going on what I called my national tour of mental hospitals. I was, I guess I'll name them. Yeah, I went to Whittier Presbyterian, followed by a wonderful visit to Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara, and then I finished up my stay at Wilford Hall in San Antonio, Texas that summer. I had a girlfriend at the time, and I remember her coming to visit me at the hospital, and she was really uncomfortable, like in the waiting room. And I remember thinking, how rude, I'm the one who's hospitalized. And here she was visiting her boyfriend, who's been locked up, and just the selfishness and the narcissism that just ran so deep that I never could see how I was hurting anybody else. I never could see how, my mantra through my entire drinking was, you don't understand. You don't understand. And the problem was that I didn't understand. I did not understand. My sophomore year I finished the national tour of hospitals that summer, and then I went back to school that next fall. I had the same roommate. And I remember the very first night of school, he wakes up to me vomiting in the sink in the bedroom. I'd been out drinking. And he sat up and he said, "We're not going to start this all over again this year, are we, Sean?" And what did I say? Nothing but, "You don't understand." Right? And it ended with, in that, I had a girlfriend briefly during this last stint. And I remember going to her door one night because we were supposed to go out on a date. And I knock on her door and she comes to the door and she says, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Well, Diana, we're supposed to go on a date." And she says, "We broke up last night." Oh, that's good to know. Because I had plans, so but I mean that's the point that my drinking had gotten me to, is that I remember staggering into the doorway of a room with some friends of mine, and at this point I had become where I drank with you, I did pills with you, I did other drugs with you, then I came back and I drank with you. But I wouldn't, they were all different groups of people, and that's how I'd spend my night. I remember swaying in the door of a room of a friend's door, and he said, "Are you okay?" And what I tried to say was, what I thought I was saying was, it's the medication that's making me look like this. What I said was, it's the medication that's doing this. And his eyes got wide, and he said, "Dude, the medication is supposed to help you, not do that." and I said, "You don't understand, right?" And so I ended up calling a psychiatrist at 3 a.m. saying I need to go back to another hospital. And he said, "Sean, you're not that kind of sick." And I'm like, "What kind of sick am I then?" Because I don't know what to do. I don't know what kind of sick I am, but I can't do anything. I'm a no good son. I'm a no good boyfriend. I'm a no good student. I'm a no good roommate. I'm a no good brother. I'm a no good boyfriend. I'm no good. And hitting that point where I just had no clue what to do. And so he made arrangements. He asked me, he said, "Well, you're 19. Do you want me to see if I can get you into a teenage recovery home or to an adult recovery home?" And I don't know about you, but when I was in mental hospitals the year before, I got a lot of crushes on girls in the hospital. I mean, what's that song? If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. So I remember, I decided, I told him, I should go to the teen recovery center because there might be young girls there. And he called me back, said, "I'm sorry, but you're an adult now, so you're going to have to go to the adult one." And so I went and I interviewed this adult rehab. I was going to interview them. So I brought a pad of paper and a purple pen. And I brought a purple pen because, of course, I was a poet. I like Prince. I like anytime the word 4 was being used, I liked using the number 4 because I was artistic like that. And I remember writing in this journal. I talked to them for about an hour, and I wrote 2 words. I wrote "hang tough." And I remember thanking Eddie, who was the intake counselor, and she gave me a big hug, saying we hug a lot around here. And I said, "But what you've taught me, if nothing else, that I'm not an alcoholic, and I just need to hang tough. I basically said, you opened my eyes." And I went back to my dorm room, and I remember my one friend left, this gal named Dana. She came downstairs because she knew I'd gone to the rehab that day to check, and she goes, "How did it go?" And I said, "You'll be happy to know that I'm not an alcoholic." and I apologize. She didn't come to my room. I waited for her outside the showers at the dorm to tell her this great news that I wasn't an alcoholic, and she didn't stop walking. She just says, "That's great," and she kept walking. And I remember being carried, and so that afternoon I was drunk again. Because I had medication that said take as needed for anxiety, and I was very anxious. I took enough. I should never be anxious again in my life. I would steal my roommate's Dilantin, which is an anti-seizure medication. I should never have a seizure in my entire life either. I mean, I was just a dumbass. So I remember being carried back to my room that night, and my head was going 180 miles an hour, but my body couldn't move. And these people were carrying me back to my room, and that whole mantra of "you're not a good son, you're not a good anything" just kept roaring through my brain. And I ended up going back to the rehab that next morning, and deciding that maybe I didn't know what to do. And I remember they took me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous at the 705 Club in Fullerton. And I don't know if a lot of you have been sober a while, probably remember like smoking meetings. And this room was a small room, and most of the meetings were podium participation. But I always joke that there was a different atmosphere. Like if you were standing, it was just smoke, solid. But if you sat down, you could see each other. And they had smoking sides of the room back then, which is really funny, right? Like I got to tell you, because it was like a marine layer. It was just there. But I remember not knowing what to do, and I remember all the people in the rehab. One said, "I'm Bob, I'm an alcoholic. I'm Sue, I'm an alcoholic." And so when it came to me, I said, "I'm Sean, I'm an alcoholic." And I didn't say it because I thought I was an alcoholic. I did it because that's what they did, and I was never going to ask for direction. I was just going to kind of see what you all were doing. I'm the kind of guy that I told this to a friend yesterday. Thank God for GPS and maps for people like me, because I will never ask direction, right? And so, I mean, I've been saved by some extent by technology. And so I remember like not knowing what you guys were talking about. And when you talked about being sober, I thought you were going to teach me how to drink safely again. You know, but I wasn't going to ask anybody if that's what you meant. I was trying to pick it up from the words you were saying. And the first time I heard someone say that you meant that you didn't drink, I was like, oh shit. You know, like how's that going to work? And I remember it was a 13-day rehab, and at the end of the 13-day rehab, I was beginning to come to a little bit. Oh my gosh! So I will get sober here in a minute. I'm sober for the books. I didn't drink again since then, but my mind was a mess. So I wasn't going to ask anybody for help in the rehab, and I only brought 3 pairs of socks. And if you've ever withdrawn from alcohol and drugs, which I think all of you have, sometimes hygiene is not necessarily... I didn't like showering, so that's really what I want to say. I didn't like showering, and when you're withdrawing and you don't like showering and you only have 3 pairs of socks, it's just not a good combination when you're sweating like that. And so after a while, like I remember I was sitting in a meeting, and it was like a table. There's people on one side and me on the other side, and I'm like, what's that? And then I realized it was me, and it was my feet, and so I would like put my feet across the table, like to the other side, so they'd think it was you, and so. So then I pulled out the soles of the shoes, like because I was thinking that's the problem, right? That's what's bad. Not the fact that I should wash my clothes. And maybe they had a washing machine at the hospital I could ask about. Like, it didn't even occur to me to ask somebody. So I ripped the soles out of these shoes. And do you know how they keep those insoles? Do you know how they keep them down? Like with sometimes like these plastic spiky things on the bottom of the shoes. So now my feet still stink, and now they're like blistering to hell, and I'm not going to say anything. And I do remember I put the insoles like in a linen basket because I didn't want to throw them away in my room. I put them like one of those hospital linen baskets. And I could be wrong about this, but I think I remember one of the people saying, "What's that?" as they walked by. But, you know, that's the kind of like just insecure basket case mess that I was. You know, I wasn't going to ask anything. I wasn't going to ask anybody. And so about near the end of the program, I remember they had the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. And I wanted to call out that if you've noticed, they broke the traditions tonight. I remember looking at the steps, and it talked about, God was capitalized, he was capitalized, him was capitalized. And that began to freak the shit out of me. And I began arguing, and I began saying, you're not talking about a God of my understanding. You're talking about that God, the one who had because realistically, like if they're, at that point, if God really was taking score, I was on the losing team, right? I mean, I was really not going to be, I lost, right? And so I was arguing like just vehemently about the fact that it wasn't a God of my understanding. It's a scam here. It's a cult. I saw you guys pass in that basket. I saw that, And no, I never had like the reality moment to realize like, okay, no place is ever going to get rich on $1 a person. But that didn't cross my mind. I'm like, I knew it's like a pyramid scheme or whatever it is, and so I'm yelling with these guys, like, you don't understand, I'm arguing, and finally everybody, all the other patients turn around and tell me to shut up. And so that was the first time I listened. and I shut up. And I remember when I was discharged from the hospital, I remember I went to one of my old parties, and I remember coming back to the rehab to say I went to a party, and I lied. I said someone else broke out drugs, and I didn't do it because I wanted them to be proud of me at the rehab that I didn't do it. And no one did. That's the lie. No one broke out any drugs because I was the guy. I was that guy, And I lied about that because I thought I'd get like a pat on the back, from the recovery group. And I remember this old guy named Blaine. He was so mean. Blaine's all like, he basically said, if you keep going to the barber, you're gonna get a haircut. And I'm like, what does that mean? And this whole idea of like, that maybe, and they told me, they said, well, maybe you just want to see what happens if you don't call those friends. See who calls you. And I'm here to tell you that none of them called. and I got a sponsor. And talk about something scary, like asking someone to be your sponsor. And if you're older, and you get sober, it's even weirder, right? Like when you're younger, you're kind of like, you are asking a lot of people weird things that you don't know when you're younger, like how to get to the mall, right? But when you're like 50 and you need to say, will you sponsor me? You feel really weird. It's really weird. You're trying to say, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? But I asked a guy named Rick to sponsor me, and he agreed to sponsor me. And I remember one night he was sitting outside, laying down on his back at a meeting, and I go, what are you thinking about, Rick? And he goes, I've been thinking how I don't want anyone to ever have to pick up after me again. And then he stands up, takes a cigarette, puts it out on the ground, stomps out, and walks in the meeting. And I'm looking at the cigarette butt. And I was smoking at the time, but you know what? I never dropped another cigarette butt on the ground again. That I began to listen. And I remember telling him that I was going to pray. I was going to start praying at school. I remember telling my roommate, I go, okay, Jack, it's going to be weird, but I'm going to be getting on my knees and praying. And he's like, okay. I'm like, but I thought I had to tell him. I remember telling Rick, I go, Rick, you'll be glad to know that I've been laying down and I'll pray, and I fall asleep. And he says, Sean, we're talking about a conscious contact with God. Not an unconscious contact with God. And so I started kneeling and praying, and I started reading from the Big Book every night, because I listened to one guy at that 705 Club say, I heard one person say they read 5 pages a day, one person said they read 1 page a day, so I settled on 2. And I'm like, whatever, I'll split the difference, and I've been doing that for 36 years. I read, and I don't do it to impress anybody, I do it because it became a discipline, right? And anyway, so the whole, the praying and the whole God thing really had me freaked out. And when they told me that could be a God of my understanding, I didn't believe you, because I saw the capital H and the capital G. And then the concept that came to me at the time, which was really simple for me, is all I wanted God to be like was I wanted to be like the dad I always wanted, which really was no matter how much I fucked up, that I'd be okay, right? That's what I wanted from a God. Is that no matter how much I messed up, that I was going to be, welcome back. That's it. I didn't need it to be any more complicated than that. And I got sober, and I began going to meetings. I began to get commitments. I began doing the easiest job in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm here to tell you what that is. The easiest job in AA is to say yes when people ask you to sponsor them. And the reason it's the easiest job in Alcoholics Anonymous is because 9 times out of 10, they will never call you. So you're really safe, and you get to say you're a sponsor. I mean, it's kind of like a win-win, right? So I began to sponsor people, and I worked the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then when I was about 1.5 years sober, I met the girl of my dreams in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know about any of you, and there's probably some people who've coupled up in AA. And this, please, no one who's dating ever take this wrong. But remember when I said that I was looking for girlfriends in the mental hospital? Just know that when you're in Alcoholics Anonymous and you're looking eye contact next to each other, and just know what we have in common is a really bad illness, right? One that takes people out, right? Like I have a friend of mine up in Portland who dated a gal for 7 years, and that girl went back out recently, and she is on Facebook, and she's lost her mind, and it is sad, and it's a scorched earth, taking down everybody and everything she's loved, because that's what we're capable of doing, is we don't Molotov cocktail bridges, we take the whole thing down with a nuclear bomb, and we say we don't care, especially if we're hurt. So I met this lady in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we were going to live happily ever after. Randy came to my first wedding. We still talked about my ex-wife a little bit ago. See, I gave away the ending, and we had twin children, And we have twin children, and they're now 30 years old. And they're amazing. Their mom and I, when I was married to her 7 years, when I was 1 year sober, I shared at a meeting, and a guy came up to me at the end of the meeting, and he said, "Are you in school?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "You get back to school." And so he goes, "You're too smart not to be in school." And when my kids were born in 1994, I was just starting back at school. And in 1997, I was just about to graduate from USC with my bachelor's degree in nursing. And she had an affair. And I remember thinking, how can this happen, God? You know, how can it happen that we're supposed to live happily ever after? It's like, it's finally going to have like a stable career and income and have this life we've built for and we planned for. And she had an affair. And it never occurred to me that life just happens, right? My daughter had epilepsy, you know, and I remember the first time she had a seizure. It took me about 3 minutes until I remembered that I actually know CPR, you know, because she stopped breathing during a seizure. And I remember thinking, why me? A little bit after that, I began working at an oncology hospital, and that's the kind of nursing I did was cancer nursing and hospice nursing. And when I worked at this cancer hospital, my office was right outside the pediatric outpatient clinic. And I'm sure all those parents were asking themselves, you know, why me, right? You know, and so it became really clear for me that like life is going to be equal opportunity, right? It's really going to still be life. It doesn't change anything about the miracles that I've had since I've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I was married for 7 years. We separated, we divorced. And then I met a gal at USC who is a nurse, and we've been married now 23 and a half years. And she brought another child into the family, and Kelsey is 28, and she's going to nursing school in the fall. And I have a granddaughter who lives in my house. We built an apartment in our house downstairs, and this little 1.5-year-old, 2-year-old comes upstairs like on a daily basis. And my name is Kempa. So that's. I tried. They asked me what I want. I wanted grandpa. Just so you know, if you ever become a grandfather, come up with something like Papa or something they can pronounce, because otherwise you're going to get something they make up. So I'm Kempa. And, you know, the life that began to be put together is one that's now spanned 36 years. You know, that I went to nursing school. You know, I became a nurse. I remember like working on the floor. Like when you work in cancer care, there's a lot of like pain management and nausea management. And I remember thinking, like looking at the dosing of the medications they're given, thinking that's not going to do anything. You know, so you have to be really careful what you share when you decide to work in the medical profession, because some things they can look at you weird. And so. My wife and I, my current wife, when we were first married, we were going to a church in Long Beach, and I don't go to a church today, but we were doing the church thing then, and I actually got asked to teach the Bible study for the college students, and during one of the lessons, I made the bong noise, you know, the. You know, and my wife like looked at me like, "What are you doing?" My wife is not an alcoholic. She's a Mormon. It's just as bad. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to go to hell. No, I was already going to hell. You know. So here I am, 36 years sober, and I just want to paint a little bit of a picture of the life that's been able to be put together, because I think it's really important. So in 2010, I was living in Sacramento, and I got a call from someone in Santa Barbara. And the kind of work that I do now, I don't work in hospice or oncology, but I install electronic health records. I do this IT kind of stuff. And I got a call from a person in Santa Barbara that said, "Hey, Sansom Clinic, the place where my dad had worked, that they need help installing a health record, and I understand you know how to do that." And what started off as being a quick meeting with a friend of mine, well, the guy who's a friend of mine now, the CEO, it turned into a job. And I got hired by the organization that my dad worked for 20 plus years, and I've worked there for 13 years. The people there loved my dad. My dad, when I was in Cottage Hospital, at the mental hospital that I'd been in, I had set a rule, because you as a patient can say who can and can't see you. My dad was an attending physician there, and he had to do rounds there, and I made it to where my dad was not allowed to see me or make eye contact with me. And so I embarrassed my dad, at his place of work. He acts like it wasn't a big deal, but knowing what I know now, the amends that I've been able to put together, that's really funny. My working for the place where he worked makes him so proud. And if there's one thing I could have ever asked for, it was like for them to be proud, I mean, that's like a big deal. It's a really big deal. I mean, they still remind me about the move from Spain to San Antonio. So just realize that little 4'11" woman, she won't let me forget. Shit. She's still to this day, she'll go, do you remember the time when you were 16 years old, you stayed up all night talking, and we had this great conversation, and then that night you ran away with your friend to Houston? And I'm all, I remember, Mom, because they're always being reminded of everything I did. But I was able to piece a life together, and I was able to actually make some really good living amends. And that's one thing I want is I really thought that life would be the type of thing that would make things better at once. And I really thought AA was going to be this fast thing. I remember pacing outside of a convention center when I was 1 year sober, dreaming about how I was going to be this amazing, keynote speaker at some amazing conference sometime, and the grandiosity that I had. But one day at a time, the things I do today, I call my sponsor, who I've had for the past 30 years, and he has Parkinson's, and he's really sick, and I love him. I read from the big book every night, as I mentioned. I go to about between 6 and 7, 8 meetings a week, depending. My wife, as I mentioned, she's not an alcoholic. She was really upset when I would be gone every evening going to meetings. So I changed my life around and became a morning meeting person. And I was never a morning person. I am. I did it because I love her. I did it because I love my family. And again, so this life, my 5 children have never seen me drink. My wife has never seen me drink. My parents remember me drinking. Not bad, right? That's pretty good odds. I met Randy here when he first, the very first day he walked into a room of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's got 35 years of sobriety. So the relationships that I built in Alcoholics Anonymous and the consistency and the discipline that you all taught me, that's the magic. That's it. Is that I learned discipline of what are the things I do no matter what, and I haven't changed those things in 36 years. So anyway, thanks for inviting me to share. Thanks a lot.